Independent music, the triangle of musicians, fans and music professionals. This is Tim from the Indie Bands blog, and welcome once again. Who's on today? Let's go find out. Welcome to Indie Music Tips number 5, and this time I'm with Paul Marr of The Nudes, a band from Bolton in England, and we're going to talk about the use of art with music. Hi Paul.
Hello Tim, how you doing? Nice.
I'm very well. Thanks very much for sparing me the time. You, I know, have got an arts degree, or maybe even a fine arts degree, and very kindly, and I will be putting this up onto these images, so keep your eyes out. Paul's very kindly drawn me a particular requested picture. So thanks, Paul. But in addition to that, you also have your own band, and then you've got this interest in art with music. So it's a really interesting topic, because I think the whole thing's changed as to how much art matters or not. So what are your thoughts? Where do you come from with this idea?
I think there's sort of twofold, really. There's obviously sort of great musicians' links with art, and it's the traditions in art. You know, what reasonably sort of thinking about sort of some of the musicians that sort of went to art college and were influenced directly by the ideas of that. The idea, for instance, of Pete Townsend smashing his guitar came directly from Music Concrete and John Cage and what the art movement was doing. To pianos at that time, chopping them up with axes. It was a direct influence on people like Townsend, of course, who was an art student. People like Lennon, Kurt Cobain, REM, Blur. The links are permanently forged and formed. To some degree, I guess some of the greatest music that's ever been created is inextricably linked with art, and certainly sort of I think art has a lot to offer in that sense. Specifically today, sort of thinking about a little bit about album covers and really sort of the use of art to promote who we are and what we are, and as a signifier of what your band is or what it wants to say or who it wants to be, then obviously sort of the album cover is massively important. I know we've spoke quite a lot about the importance of that, and also really the fact that the size of an album cover these days is obviously sort of much reduced. Is the world.
Yes, it's no longer 12 inches, is it?
And I think we talked about gatefolds. The whole idea of
yes,
sort of 1970s sort of gatefold albums, and with all the lyrics in, and they're almost like things of beauty to some degree, and and in and of themselves were massively important. And I think about Factory Records in Manchester, and you think of the fact that Factory was permanently broke because it put such thought into the artwork that often the actual sort of money that they got back off the music was sort of, they were breaking even, but the album covers looked amazing, and the truth of it was, you think of groups like New Order, obviously Joy Division, all these great bands, and the artwork that it mattered. It mattered so much to the people who were making those records.
Yeah.
And as like I said, it goes back to the idea of what are you selling? We're selling something other than, you were selling ideas, and that's, I suppose, what art is really. Art's about ideas, and I think if you manage to get something that is of a cover for your group or your band or your own sort of single that says something unique, says something different than said in the marketplace.
I think that's a really important point, because this is something that's come up on the series so far, and it's only number 5, is that there is so much out there, and it's all this stereotypical band photograph on the front page and nothing else. And I guess what you're saying, which is important because people are looking for differentials, is that by using images, strong, powerful images, you can differentiate yourselves.
Absolutely. I mean, to be quite honest, when I had the opportunity to think of my band's EP cover, for instance, one of the things I looked for a long time about sort of perhaps what would represent the band, what would represent the sort of various things that I'm trying to get across musically. You know, what would do that in one fell swoop? And the image that I settled, actually found in the end was by a fine artist. It was a pre-existing image. It wasn't done specifically for our cover. So I approached that artist to ask if we could actually sort of use that image, because I thought it had a lot of resonance to it. It's quite modern, and I think a lot of thought really went into sort of picking of that particular sort of image. And I think perhaps that's what bands perhaps need to do, is link up with artists, with fine artists, printmakers, graphic students, animators, and realise that actually sort of if your work is good, if your work is of any real worth, then some of these people might want to get involved, just for the sake of sort of the association. And I think through that association we strengthen the product, And I think going back to what you were saying, sort of some grimacing sort of, or moody, some grimacing faced sort of smiling pop star, or some menacing looking band all scowling, looking into a camera. What does it say? Well, it says realistically, it says nothing different than it did in the 1950s when it was originally used.
Sure.
And I think that's the point really. That if you think about people like Tony Wilson in Manchester, putting such real depth of thought into what would this represent, this artwork? How do we tie something interesting to something else that's also interesting, and how does that strengthen the overall product?
I guess something interesting that you've raised, because one question that was sort of sitting in the back of my head is that's all marvellous, but as you said, factory records never made any money because they cared so much about their artwork, and all these bands that I'm speaking to are penniless as well. It's like, well, what? You're suggesting what? But actually, I was heading somewhere then, and I've forgotten. I know where I was going. But what you're talking about is quite interesting, because although I write about bands all the time, I do get a surprising number of artists contacting me that are saying, I'm an independent, struggling artist. Yeah. Is there anything you can do to help me? So you're actually sort of pointing out to two disparate groups. Yeah. Look, there's a bunch of guys with no money wanting to talk to a bunch of guys with no money to help each other. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it seems quite kismet, because the two things in real terms, they're not exclusively sort of different. If we think about how music's influenced art, that's happened time and time again. You have to look at people like Jackson Pollock being influenced by Gershwin. And that's created, marvellous works of art that wouldn't have existed without the music being in place to sort of set the ball rolling. And I think those things are kismetly tied in our understanding, post-20th century. So we understand, really, the fact that someone like Peter Blake would work with the Beatles, because why wouldn't he? Those two things have already been brought together, that idea's already there. What I'm finding is kind of a little bit like we were sort of explaining, pre the recording, really, was the fact that now, in real terms, we've got this sort of almost separation where we've got, like you say, these struggling, artist groups, we've got these struggling sort of musician groups, and again, it's about sort of building some form of community, and making a product that really, really works, that really stands out. I mean, I'm sure, you probably found it yourself over the years. If you're presented with, say, a CD, probably in the old days when you used to get the CDs sent to you, and the artwork looked quite interesting, it's visually something that perhaps might sort of entertain us more. And I suppose that's the same on iTunes. If I get a great review of a band, for instance, but I look at the artwork and I think, it's pretty functional, I probably won't buy the thing. And I think what it says to me is kind of, well, I guess it sort of says that there must be some lack of originality in the process. Mm-hmm. It doesn't ring true, perhaps, or doesn't quite come across the way the band would want it to. And I think you can always sort of, for every zeitgeist making band, there is a zeitgeist making artist following what they're doing. Sure. And I think those things for me, are still quite massive in association. And I don't think we've seen great artist collaborations, for quite some time. But when we did, in times that we did, some of that music, some of the most exciting music that ever existed, from the Who, from the Kinks, from the Beatles, from the Stones, from Nirvana, from R.E.M., from Talking Heads, from the Buzzcocks. The Buzzcocks are a great example. finally you got into my era, the punk era. There am I sitting there, teed up with my comment, which was most of the punk bands came out. They were art college students.
Absolutely. There was some of the greatest, album art that was ever sort of produced. I mean, thinking of the Buzzcocks, they worked with a lady called Linder. Can't remember her surname, but I saw her work and met her a couple of times. And the fact that I met her and knowing, what the singles covers look like, for some of the Buzzcocks' early work, and it was just phenomenal. And again, they tied themselves almost immediately to someone, of great worth in their fields. There's two things tied together. And if we look at sort of, the obvious one there, the Sex Pistols and Jamie Reed's work, I mean, Jamie Reed had a lot to say, bar the Sex Pistols. But the fact that we have an artist with lots to say, and we have a band that are kind of, desperate to sort of say something, and I think pushing those two things together, you've got this almost, sort of intoxicating mix of art and music, and that's exciting. And I think it was exciting in 1976, 1977, and it'd be exciting today. And I think the truth of it is, what we have is a sort of, almost stuck in sort of Mumford and Sons world, aren't we? And in the sense that we've got sort of, navel gazing sort of bands with pictures of themselves on the covers and very little sort of aesthetic aspects sort of play really, or wanting to say something, or wanting to do something, or being different for the sake of being different. And I think I think there's a great lack of any joined up sort of thinking across art. I think possibly the last time we saw any even movement towards that was possibly in the Britpop year, and it was 1 year. It was 1995. Apart from that, didn't really exist. And what we did see that year is we saw some of the best young fine artists in the country attaching themselves very clearly to a scene that was sort of happening. And again, it's an intoxicating mix. It makes the zeitgeist happen somewhere. It makes a city like London exciting for a year. But if we can't keep that up, then obviously sort of the zeitgeist moves on, and it always has, and it always will. And that's the right thing to have happen. That means we've got lazy. That means we've slackened off. But again, any great movement I can think of, any time that Britain's had one of these musical zeitgeists, one of these periods of time that we were important in any sphere, is when we tie it very clearly to having a much wider identity than just music. I think, like you say, when we sort of focus in on one aspect, the whole thing doesn't pay off as well.
Sure. I mean, it's interesting. People can't see this because I never record the talking head behind a webcam. But you just sat up a bit, and I can see you've got an iconic Ramones T-shirt on.
Absolutely.
So, which exactly, once again, it's like bang, it's in your face, and it's there.
Yeah. And I mean, you go back to great album covers, and I was looking at the Elvis Presley one, the first album he did, and there was a program on about sort of that album. And if you look at it, it is a photograph of Elvis, but the graphics that are used are phenomenal. And it just says Elvis Presley in these really garish, bright sort of colours. And the album works. And it almost, years later, you could see how that influenced, the famous Clash cover and London's Calling and things like that.
Sure.
And you could see that they were sort of aping back to these exciting sort of times and covers. And again, it goes to sort of show that these things matter. If they didn't matter, then realistically, sort of everybody just have a black cover with your name written in pen somewhere on there. Maybe that would be a more interesting idea. I don't think that's been done. Give that a go. And I think perhaps that sort of the idea really that ideas matter as opposed to sort of it's very difficult when we're talking about being original. I doubt very few things are truly original, but I think it matters enough that someone wants to break a few rules here and there with regard what's supposed to happen, what's the convention. Well, the convention is you're supposed to have a picture of your band on your front cover. Well, don't do that then. That's immediately more exciting, isn't it? And it's liberating.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of, what are the conventions? I think the best thing any artist or any band can do to some degree is write down all the conventions, then slowly go about breaking each one of them. And you perhaps meeting some of the needs then that art has of anything. It's got to be kind of, it doesn't have to be wholly original, but it certainly has to attempt to not follow the conventions it's sort of, they're there in place as some kind of golden rule.
I think that's an interesting point, and you've actually brought up something that again has come up all the way through these conversations that I'm doing. It's about connecting with people, and you've brought in a new dimension of connection, and it is that dimension with people that are in a slightly different environment, very much related or potentially very much related, and bringing those people into you, and it's got to be the number one lesson that's coming out of all of these series is connect with people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I appreciate your thoughts on art with music. What about the Nudes and Paul Marr?
Okay. So I suppose personally, the whole sort of idea of art being important. I mean, I did my dissertation years ago when I did my fine art degree on Yoko Ono, which was quite interesting. And again, sort of how those two things marry and sort of merge, and that became quite sort of fascinating. But I was always very interested in sort of sort of Dadaism and things like the Fluxus movement, and these were movements really about ideas, having ideas, and some of the things I suppose contained within the Nudes. I was thinking of, we did a track called Go Getter, and I suppose it works at it can work at one very simple level where people think it's a sort of jokey track, and another level it's a very sad song, and then I always kind of thought of it as being so almost like the Beatles meet Scott Walker, and I thought, kind of if the Beatles were back in Scott Walker, what would that sound like? I kind of like the idea of playing with convention in that sense, and I thought about songs like Jackie, from the 1 to 4 Scott album, and it's kind of quite over the top, and I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to almost sort of that sort of Beatlesy happy sort of flowing thing, but with that very sort of dark, sort of strange Scott Walker in sort of lyric, and if you think about sort of the vocal how that works and singing that, it's kind of quite interesting, sort of track. I've many times when I wrote it, like I said, singing Scott Walker style, sort of in a world that puts you in your place, you were many, that kind of thing going on, and then they're okay, But if we merge that with the Beatles, we get something different. We kind of, it kind of adds a, again, something slightly different. Just by changing a few little conventions around, a few little things around, I think, you don't have to, like, reinvent the wheel. But by playing with the colour box, if you've got all these lovely colours, play with them. And by colours, I mean sounds or ideas or influences, just by combining two of your influences, you're getting something completely different, And I suppose that's kind of, musically what I like to do. And how the art sort of influences me there, and then within the context of my artwork, I kind of like a very people-y sort of person. So a lot of the work that I tend to do tends to be about people and sort of interaction within people, and again, what community sort of brings and what it means. So a lot of the fact that we're talking today about people reaching out to other people, and actually sort of saying, look, we can't sort of sit back on our laurels. We've got to kind of reach out one way or another, and people have to reach back. But I think if you're a band and you're attempting to sort of do something quite difficult, all your passion is sort of driving what you do, then realistically, the best thing that can ever happen to your band is that other people listen to it. So reaching out and making sure that happens is a good thing. So by approaching people, just think of it as one extra person who might actually get to hear what you're doing, and then just make sure that what they're hearing is kind of worth hearing, I suppose, that it means something to you. And I think the first thing has got to be passion, and the second thing has got to be sort of ideas, and then twisting of those ideas to get something that's interesting to you, if nothing else,
Go Getter was certainly the track that first captured my attention and made me think, I actually quite enjoy this, because it did combine that. I forget exactly the words that I used, but it's. I think I compared it to something along the Meaning of Life by Monty Python, with a cheerful kind of noise, but a really acerbic lyric lying underneath it, and that's what got me involved. But speaking of of connections. Other than very kindly donating a piece of artwork to me, what about connections? What if there's a band that's listening to this, looks at the images that are on this video, and says, well, actually, I wouldn't mind getting this guy to do some work with us? Can they contact you and talk to you about that?
Absolutely. And also, if I can't do it, and I probably know other artists, so the reality of it is, kind of at the end of the conversation is if I couldn't do it specifically myself, I will know other people who can.
So how can they contact you, Paul?
Well, if they contact me through Facebook, I've got an open public Facebook page, and I think probably my name's sort of mentioned. I don't know if the spelling of it.
Okay, I'll put the link to that.
And people, I'd be quite happy to sort of speak to any band that and obviously talk about their ideas. And like I said, if I didn't feel that as though I could fulfil that, and perhaps potentially they might not have a great opportunity to actually meet someone who might be able to help them with that, then I will definitely know people. And in this, so one of the best things about the world we're living in is the ability to communicate, through Skype or Facebook or any of these things. So one way or another, we can sort of send images that way as well.
I will make sure that I do drop the link down, because being a thick Englishman, I managed to pronounce Paul Meagher as Paul Meagher, because that's how you spell it. Or even Meagher, I believe you've had it.
Meagher,
Meagher or something. Anyway, it's Paul Meagher. The link's below. Thanks very much for your time, Paul. Really appreciate it. Let's finish off with one of your tracks from the Nudes called Evermore. Thanks, Paul.
Cheers, Tim.
Ghostly